Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome and thank you for joining us today. On behalf of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce in Qatar, it is a pleasure to welcome to our webinar, Geopolitical Risks in Middle East, Impact and Risk Management Strategy for Companies. We are pleased to have with us today two experts from Control Risks, Niamh McBurney and Angiolo Tosi, who will talk about the current situation and how to manage risks. The webinar will last approximately 1 hour. Please note that this session is being recorded and will be uploaded to our channel and YouTube channel. Now I will hand over to our speaker. Thank you very much for being with us today, and I hope you enjoy the session. Niamh?
I'll pick this up. Giuseppe, thank you very much. And good afternoon, everybody. My name is Angelo Tosi. I think Niamh and I will quickly introduce ourselves. So I am a director of our advisory risk consulting practice for the Middle East. I've lived in the region for over 15 years. I've been traveling in and out of the region for over 20 years, and I've spent the last almost 12 years at Control Risks, mostly advising clients on crisis management, risk management, and resilience of how to protect themselves in situations like we have found ourselves in the last 6 weeks. Niamh?
Thank you, Angelo. It's lovely to be here with you all today. My name is Niamh McBurney. I'm a director in our Geopolitical and Country Risk team. I'm the head of analysis for the Middle East and North Africa Geopolitical and Country Risk team. And my family have been in the region now for almost 30 years. And I'm living back in the Gulf in Dubai for the last 4. So it's my pleasure and our pleasure to be here with you today and to talk you through some of the analysis that we've been sharing with our clients over the last couple of weeks. Angelo?
Thanks. Before we go on and jump into the presentation, I thought it's just useful to explain to you what we do as a company. So we are a specialist risk and intelligence and security company. We advise clients, multinationals, governments all over the world on a range of issues. So geopolitical risk monitoring, which is very much what Niamh covers, threat intelligence and risk assessment, so clients can make decisions based on threats and good intelligence before they take any actions on risk management. Then we move to what I do, which is crisis response and management on behalf of clients. But we also have teams who work on issues like cybersecurity or protective security as well. You know, we've been in the region. Our company is 50 years old. We operate in about 40 countries around the world. We've been in the Gulf for just over 20 years as a business as well, but have operated in the Middle East as a group since the 80s. So we feel we have a very deep knowledge of the region, and we're very happy to talk to you this afternoon. Niamh, over to you.
Thanks. So I'm going to give you a sense of what our scenarios are for what we might see over the next couple of weeks, and just kind of talk through some of the changing dynamics that we've seen across the region, because it's quite important to note the very pivotal historical moment that we're in, and how we think in a broader sense this may play out. So something for you to keep in mind. So we have seen an unprecedented regional conflict, including direct and indirect actors. It began on the 28th of February with the US and Israel carrying out direct action against Iran, and Iran responded by targeting Israel and the Gulf Arab states in the first instance of where Iran has directly targeted the GCC nations in a hot war. It's not the first time there have ever been, shall we say, military tensions between Iran and the GCC countries. There have been a few moments over the last 40 years, isolated moments, but this is the first hot war that the GCC countries have ever been a party to. And as you can see from the map, which is a map that we use on one of our information platforms, the colours in the background are our risk ratings, which describe the level of risk in a given country at a particular point in time. And these are the risk ratings for war specifically. We also rate a number of other items in security, including civil unrest and crime, but those colours from the green as the very low risk up to the dark red as the high risk indicates the war risk, and those red dots you see in the background, those are is the heat map of the incidents our team has logged across countries in the region over the last 30 days. So quite a few, as you can see. But the war has spread across the region to affect Israel, not just the GCC states, and all of the GCC states. None of them were left alone. But also we have seen the outbreak of conflict in Lebanon, where Israel has started a related but separate ground operation there, which whatever happens over the next few weeks regarding the sort of US-Israel-Iran war, we do expect Israel ground operations in Lebanon to continue really into the summer as Israel looks to try and counteract Lebanese Shia group Hezbollah. As I said, it's related to the Iran war, but really we can consider it a separate category. So just to briefly give you a sense of where we think things are going to go over the next 10 days. So at the moment, there is some positive momentum, which is really notable in the bilateral talks between the US and Iran that are being mediated by Pakistan. There is speculation that another round of talks is being organized, speculation as to when it may be held. Some reports are suggesting as soon as Thursday, in 2 days' time, or over the weekend, or even early next week. We do think there probably will be another second round of talks. If not on or before the 21st of April, which is nominally thank you very much, Angelo, which is nominally the deadline that President Trump gave when announcing the ceasefire last week. If one doesn't happen on the 21st or before, we suspect it will shortly, it will happen shortly after. And what I do want to make clear is that there are very, very significant, almost insurmountable differences between the two sides, at least in the way they have presented both of their positions in public. That's the US and Iran. At the core of the issue is the fact that the US wants Iran to nominally never be able to enrich uranium again, to be able to enrich it, to be able to develop a nuclear weapon. And in turn, Iran wants to make sure it can always maintain nuclear enrichment capability, and also in doing so doesn't want to find itself in a position where it is forced to admit that it may consider one day developing a nuclear weapon. This last point about admitting whether or not it would develop a nuclear weapon is slightly philosophical, but is quite important because with the change in leadership in Iran, Iran's political elite has an opportunity to remove a burden it had created for itself, which is on the face of it a policy where the previous supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, had said that Iran would never develop a nuclear weapon. And it has an opportunity to be a bit more flexible on this point. But trying to bridge the gap between the two sides is going to be really very challenging. And what is even more fascinating, but even more challenging, is the fact that they're trying to negotiate this while they're also simultaneously trying to negotiate an end to the hot war that we are currently in a pause from. So there's no shortage of barriers to either a sort of prolonged ceasefire or a formal truce that would end the hostilities itself, but there's also no end to barriers in trying to create a second full nuclear deal, which ideally is what the Trump administration would like to see out of this conflict, and ultimately it prompted this conflict in order to try and do what President Trump would like of the US is a second JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, that was signed in 2015 under the Obama administration. And arguably he has started this war in order to try and realize this. He may yet. Currently, under our most likely scenario for the next 70 days, we do see the talks continuing, and both sides do have incentives to remain at the table. But as I said, the actual substance of both sides' positions mean that there may be insurmountable gaps. But at least for the next 7 to 10 days, we can expect continued talks. And there may be a few drones that hit some of the smaller Gulf countries. Some of you may be aware that Kuwait and Bahrain, today, the morning of yesterday, Monday, and the previous day, both countries experienced a couple of apparent drone attacks. No clear reports as to where those originated from. So there is a latent risk of some countries being targeted. But broadly speaking, the security environment is reasonably more positive now, and we expect that positivity to continue as long as both sides keep talking and indicate they're willing to keep talking as well. In the event that there was to be a formal breakdown in the talks, that the one side formally walks away and says we are not negotiating on any of these terms, which is possible given on the face of it the intractability of either side's position. Under our credible alternative, we would expect in that scenario to see a sudden re-escalation of the conflict that would see a resumption of the kind of targeting of the GCC countries and of Israel that we saw at least in the previous 10 days of the war before the ceasefire was announced on the 8th of April. So recurrent targeting of energy infrastructure and government-owned economic structure across the GCC that Iran was targeting before, possibly with more damage. And so a kind of resumption to that slightly more difficult environment that we have been living in up until relatively recently. And then our outlier scenario is where both sides nominally appear to come to some agreement, but really what it is a bit of a diplomatic fig leaf to allow both sides to end the war and to be able to walk away from this pretending they've both won. But what it does is create the diplomatic space, lowering the political temperature to allow them to engage in a months-long really constructive process to resolve the nuclear issue. And it would also resolve, domestic political issues that both countries have with regards to the war as well. Iran has its own tensions at home, political and economic stability, and the war is increasingly unpopular in the US as well. So that's our kind of outlook for the next 10 days. So just to remind you of our most likely is a fragile ceasefire with talks continuing, but nonetheless with some periodic tensions. And I should, of course, say that as part of this most likely, the US blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, which began yesterday, is an important area of potential, well, certainly of tension, but of potential conflagration. For now, there are very few vessels attempting to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, concerned about the fact that there are now two risk actors controlling the waterway that were not before, Iran and the US as well. So that does make things more difficult for the maritime community more broadly. But we will have to wait and see how things develop and how the US actually kind of enforces the blockade that it's imposed. But just briefly, the triggers to see the most likely develop, as I mentioned, the first would be the announcement of a potential second round of talks. So probably sometime over the next couple of days. And then another trigger for sort of positivity over into next week and maybe early the following week would be the announcement of a third round of talks, or even the possible kind of concerted leaking of positive aspects where both sides agreed on, to indicate that goodwill is developing where it has not been before. To the credible alternative triggers that we'll be watching for is if there's an intensification of very negative and aggressive language by senior political leaders on both sides after the second round of talks. That might indicate an increased level of tension, or also if there is an event in either in the Gulf or in and around the Strait of Hormuz, which between either a US vessel, an Iranian vessel, or a US vessel and a merchant ship, that for whatever reason could then prompt wider kinetic action on the sea. So those are two key triggers there. And just briefly, I want to touch on the kind of ramifications for the next couple of years. We've seen the Arab countries be really very shocked by what they've experienced. For a number of countries in the GCC, this is the first time they've ever experienced direct conflict. Of course, there are countries in this region for whom conflict either is very familiar, such as Lebanon, or Kuwait, which has experienced something similar to this, although much more severe, the better part of 26 years ago. So this is really going to change mindsets across the region. It's fair to say that some of the...
Yes.
We're really going to kind of, this is going to lead to a kind of reassessment of political relationships, of economic relationships. Things that we may have presumed about the world just 6 weeks ago are not going to be the case over the next 5 years. And so I think there's certainly going to be a redrawing of relationships and boundaries that is going to have ramifications for those of us as businesses operating in the region, but also the kind of customers and clients that we deal with. I'm going to leave it there and hand over to Angelo to talk about the practical aspects of crisis management and operations at a time like this.
Thanks very much, Niamh. And before I jump into that, I think I can see we're a relatively small group, only 16 of us on the call. So I think it would be hopefully better for all of you and also easier for Niamh and I if you wanted to turn this into more of a discussion. So what I'll do is go through a couple of key points here with you, but I think we'd like to have most of the session, turn it into a Q&A session as much as we can. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or please just feel free to put up your hand and please jump in and ask us questions. We're happy to make this more interactive and as interactive as possible for you. I think you get the most out of this if we do that. So I'm only really going to touch on three areas where we think businesses are going to be at risk, because I think they cover some of the touch points where, in the earlier title we talked about people, operations, assets, and supply chain. I feel we cover these here. So the first is operations. So we have seen disruption to operations, and then the key example that we've seen in the last few weeks has been around data centers. Is that data center infrastructure has disrupted businesses, and we're going to see. And I think Niamh used the term, there'll be a change in mindsets in the short term or the medium term in the region. We also think that the businesses operating in the region will change their mindsets in terms of where and how they store data. So we're probably going to start seeing more what multi-region cloud infrastructures or architectures or GCC +1 type operating models, where companies still feel that it's a relatively safe environment to work in, but they're going to maybe invest a little bit more in their resilience to ensure that they can continue operations in case of a flare-up. What happens in my world, where I advise clients on mitigation or how to think about new risks, is that most companies will probably not want to address certain things in normal time, but whenever we see an event like this happen, we tend to see a spike in interest in these types of topics. And that's one of the first areas I think that companies will start to rethink their operations. The fact that tech firms were threatened, the fact that data centers were disrupted, will be a big driver. So that's on the operations. On the supply chain side, I see Niamh has talked quite a lot about the Strait of Hormuz being sort of the primary issue right now, and I think, you know, the prior to the threats of blockades, there was an immediate in the early stages of the crisis, there was a collapse of war risk insurance, which also then meant a lot of companies were starting to basically preventing themselves from crossing the strait. So what we see in the coming months is a shortage of some luxury goods, not basic goods. Basic goods will almost always be available in the Gulf, but we're going to see and we're going to see companies rethinking their supply chain routes, starting to look at alternatives, perhaps ways to use alternative ports in the region and start using overland routes into some of the key markets. So we're already starting to see some of our clients utilize those resources, and we see there's going to be an increase. The third element that I think is worth also talking about is around travel, but also just general mobility. That, you know, at the moment, yes, flights have been disrupted, and only the national carriers have been operating. Sorry, somebody's got their microphone on. Would you mind turning it off, please? Thank you. So yeah, there's been some disruption in travel. Needless to say, we felt a lot of that in the earlier days, and I believe in Qatar we felt that for slightly longer than the UAE did. But we also see there's going to be more restriction around non-critical travel. That travel itself might be questioned in the coming months. You know, a lot of our clients are already starting to say things to us around, you know, the fact that they have duty of care and they have duty of care to employees. They have to really rethink where they send people within the region, and we see some restrictions around that coming in the coming months. You know, we're going to face the risk of last minute cancellations in region. And you know, one of the things that we see a lot of our clients starting to ask about is pre-travel risk assessments, whether they, you know, to what extent the company feels comfortable in sending people to different places, not just the destination, but also the route. So we see there's going to be a real increase in security monitoring there. So those are the three key issues that we see. Yes, I think any conflict of this nature will have financial impact, but that'll manifest itself in any number of ways. So it's a little bit difficult for us to describe one particular way that will happen. But what, you know, those are the three key issues that we see. I think I'm going to leave that there, and we're happy to sort of take some questions from the group this afternoon. If anybody has anything specific they would like to hear from us, then we're very happy to answer that. Someone please go first. Okay, Giuseppe, how would you like to continue if we don't have any questions from the group? Would you like to what would you like to do?
Hi. No, I don't have any question, but if the attendee have any question, please raise your hand or write them in the chat. If don't have question, we have now reached the end of the webinar.
If there's any questions that anyone in the audience has that they'd maybe like to ask offline, then please, please go ahead.
Yeah, Salvador Marin had one question. Okay. Okay, Salvador, please.
Yeah, thank you, Fina. Angelico, I just have a question. What is the provision when it comes to, alternative supply chain routes, when it comes to, to bring goods here to Qatar?
What is the provision? It depends on the goods. So our clients will range from businesses like FMCG companies to supermarket chains, but we also work with clients in the heavy industry and construction sectors. So depending on the availability, I think what right now we're seeing is smaller, more perishable items we're seeing those coming on by aircraft, which obviously makes things more expensive. But we're also seeing use of alternative ports for Qatar. Now, for Qatar, that probably makes most sense for those ports to be in the UAE to cross the border, so on the east coast of the UAE, or from the west coast, the western provinces of Saudi Arabia. All of those are going to increase the costs of those goods, and we're probably going to see an increase in price. They're also going to slow down the speed at which those goods can arrive. For the more essential items, we see those being flown in because, again, the Gulf states particularly Qatar, they've invested heavily in alternative supply chains because of events from the last 10 years, and they have those routes in place. So we don't see shortages as such, but we do see delays. But yeah, I think the two main key elements are, yes, there's always a route in, there's always an alternative way, but prices and time are going to be major factors for those routes. Salvador, did you have any particular types of products in mind?
Yeah. Thank you. Just I have another question. Let's consider a scenario in where, let's say, they open the Strait of Hormuz today itself. What will be the impact? When we will recover the normal operations in terms of time, in a timeline?
Can I ask, do you mean like port operations for import export, or do you mean energy, or was there something in particular you're thinking of?
Just goods and services.
So, I mean, what is helpful right now is that in most of the Gulf countries, actually, I think all of them except Kuwait, even though I think Kuwait may be mostly as well. So in Qatar, in the UAE, ports are operating as normal, but there are just very few vessels coming in and out because they cannot get in and out of the strait. So all of the services in the ports themselves are continuing, which means that once the waterway is fully accessible, they will just need to increase their capacity and go back to the way it was before. So that will happen probably pretty quickly. What we also think will happen is that some of the additional supply chains that have been created that didn't exist before, or if they did, they were very, very minimally used. For example, between Oman and the UAE into the rest of the GCC, will probably be kept on for a little while because it'll be useful to have a bit of a contingency. Yes, that's a cost, but I think ultimately we're going to have much more sophisticated and more options in the supply chains that we have across the region. On ports, though, the actual operations will probably happen pretty quickly. The question is around vessels are now in the wrong places, the ships themselves. If you have goods in a container, a 40-foot container, when the container ship may have normally been in the Gulf, now may be in Singapore. So you may need to wait for it to come to Singapore. So there will be a slightly longer delay once everything starts again, as vessels get into the right places. But port operations themselves should resume at the same level as before the war pretty quickly.
Did you any news about the Yemen passage being blocked?
So it hasn't been yet. There have been, I'll describe it as an unofficial warning. So there's been an unofficial warning from the group that controls northern Yemen, the Houthi movement. But it is not blocked. It's still operating as normal. It's still open. It's possible that it does, but to be honest, if the ceasefire continues and if the political talks continue, then it will probably not close at all. It will not be affected at all.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Nif and Angiolo. Any other question? Okay. If no, we had now reached the end of the webinar. It's okay, Nif and Angiolo? Thank
Great.
you.
Well, thank you very
Okay.
much. Thank you. Have a good evening,
Okay,
everyone.
thank you again to our speaker.
Thank you very much.
For this very interesting session. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us today. We hope you find it useful and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Thank you, everybody, and have a
Thank
good
you,
afternoon.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye.